Hello there, hello there, hello there, YouTubes. How the devil are you all? I was rather well, but I've been jilted, and it seems twice, which is a little annoying. And firstly, at this time, I was supposed to be doing a hangout with Blaire White, and that didn't end up happening.
Hey.
Oh, hello. I've just been interrupted during my intro by the beautiful Ms. Winters. How the devil are you?
I'm good, but it's like late at night and I'm in my jam, so it's dark on where I am. No camera for me.
Yes, well, yes, I was just explaining to people, I was supposed to be doing a thing with Blaire White, that didn't happen. And I thought I'd been stood up by you as well, which would have been surely a first, cross-continental jiltings.
Oh, yeah.
Jiltings in the same.
It was just a bad link. And so I got sent into a call room, and then we finally connected up, and now here I am interrupting your flow.
Yes, well, and I couldn't be happier that it's you interrupting my flow, although that sounds weird now. Anyway, yes, this isn't really about anything. This is just I was in the mood, and sort of I built myself.
I thought you said you were in the nude, but then no, it was a long ood. A bit.
It's mixed because my grasp of the English language is not great when I'm sober, and I'm not sober. So there's that. I've been doing the Blaire White thing, but I thought, fuck it, seems though she said, and to be fair, like, she said something come up and she'll reschedule. I'm not going to hold my breath, but it doesn't really matter either way. I was just going to tear into her, so I wasn't so much going there to debate her as I was to fucking drag her, basically. But anyway, that hasn't happened. So I thought, well, I'll do a thing and just put the link in. We've got a little group thing with some people, and I'll put it in there and see who pops up. And Christy said she wanted to do it. So hello there, Dr. Winters.
Hello, back from Germany after spending some feedback. Back from Germany. God, sorry, lots of feedback. Sorry. I'm home again after 4 weeks in the field doing research, actually still finishing up a few post-election focus groups. But wow, what a time to have been living in the UK the last month.
Yeah, and you've left and everything's turned to shit, frankly.
Well, it was kind of it was kind of on the downward slide when I was there, so I don't think I helped in any way to prevent or alter the course of history by the butterfly effect of my presence. But
exactly. And also the fact that it's happened under a female prime minister clearly shows that women cannot lead. I think that has been conclusively proven there. Definitely.
Well, it is very interesting because if you look around the political leadership of British or UK, I should say, political parties, you've got Theresa May, you've got Nicola Sturgeon, Ruth, what's her name, who's leading the Scottish people up in
Davison.
Yes, I want to say Davies, but I know that's not it. And the leader of the DUP is a woman too, I believe.
Yes, Arlene Foster, and of course the leader of Plaid Cymru, whose name has totally escaped me.
Leanne Wood.
Leanne Wood, yeah. So yeah, there are all the three major parties in Scotland are led by WOMs. The leader of the government is a WOM, and as well, there isn't really technically a devolved government in Northern Ireland at the moment. But if there were, it would be Arlene Foster. So yeah, there are lots of women in powerful positions, which in general is good. And actually, I was gonna do a video about this. I don't know if you're aware of a British feminist YouTuber called Claudia Bolin.
No, I'm not. But, tell me about her.
Yeah, you should. She's actually very good generally, but I was going to make a video in response to her. She put out a video just before the election, actually, and she's sort of relatively lefty, as you might imagine. But she put out a video defending Theresa May on the basis that one of the things that was put out about her was that she's sort of cold, she's not very approachable, she doesn't smile a lot, and so on and so forth. And Claudia did the thing, which I think in general is true, but in the case of public servants, I think you can expect slightly more. Where she was going down the line of, oh well, women don't owe you a smile, women don't owe you a reaction for any particular reason, blah blah blah. And I think in general that's true. If you're just a random woman walking down the street, yes, they don't owe you a smile, they don't owe you any reaction. But when you're asking to run the country, you're asking people to put that amount of faith in you. I think a smile isn't the end of the world to expect, is it?
No, you're trying to win people over, and the way we tend to do that
Yeah.
as primates is by a smiling motion on our face and genuine happiness in our eyes. Yeah.
Yeah, well, not just
So
that, but even if you don't really care about the individuals or the people of your nation, you at least have to try and pretend to care, surely. I don't think that's too much to expect. But,
you know,
there you go.
I was young enough to support Al Gore when he was running for, or old enough, I should say. I'm old enough to have supported Al Gore when he was running for president. And, he got hit up on the same thing of being stiff and kind of, not very warm and not very human and relatable. There is a case to be made that female leaders or women who run for political office do face an extra level of scrutiny on their looks. That's a totally legitimate complaint.
Yeah.
But I think to say that a politician running for office shouldn't, should somehow be expected not to smile at you just seems to go against what the whole purpose of being a politician is.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring up, and I'm not going to do the video in the end, but one of the points I was going to bring up was an actual example of the way in which women are treated in a bad way. And in regards to Theresa May, just before having talked about the First Minister of Scotland, basically the Scottish version of the Prime Minister, anyway. Even though Scotland, the Prime Minister of Britain is also the Prime Minister of Scotland, it's complicated. Anyhow, they had like a summit about Brexit because there's certain powers that had evolved, and so there has to be some link up between Westminster and the parliaments in the other countries, and full, strong women who've gotten to the top of their professions. You think they'll be treated with a certain amount of respect, but the Daily Mail, which is the second largest selling newspaper in the country, and a right-wing shit rag of shitbaggery, put on the front page of its paper on the day, or the day after, whatever, reporting on this, Legxit, which is obviously a play on the word Brexit, because the two women had dared to wear skirts, not even particularly short skirts, really conservative. You didn't see, of the 4 knees between the two women, you didn't see a single knee. So there was very conservative skirts, but you could see a bit of leg. And so they focused on the fact that they had their legs out.
Yeah. And
on the front page. And you think no man would ever be treated that derisively.
Well, just think back to Blaire's Babes, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. Yeah, that was. I mean, up until this general election, Blaire's Babes, which is the name for the female intake of MPs in when Labour's landslide in '97, and there were up until this election. I think 2005 was the most female MPs there had ever been. Babes, and they were treated like sort of dolly birds, basically.
Yeah.
Powerful women who've. I mean, they've not got to the top of their profession, but they've become, elected representatives. Treat them with a certain amount of fucking dignity. I mean, if they do something wrong, by all means, criticise. I think that's perfectly fine. They're public servants, but you would never treat men in that way. I mean, it really is disgusting. But anyway, and so I was going to juxtapose that to the sort of nonsense of wanting to smile.
Right. Yeah.
And I get the general thing. Like you remember the brilliant piece of footage that was shot of the woman walking around New York and the harassment she received. I think,
yes.
Yeah, if you're a random person walking down the street, well, actually, no one should ever have to put it with that. But I mean, specifically in terms of wanting a reaction or feeling you're entitled to some reaction. But when you're looking for the highest office or the highest elected office in the land,
yeah,
I think you can expect a smile. I don't think that's the end of the world. I mean, we are looking to try. You are trying to get a job that's worth like £80,000 a year and has the power to destroy nations and stuff. Come on. Anyway,
I would agree that this would be a misapplication of that valid critique. And there we go. Feminists were at each other's throats.
Exactly. Cannibalizing one another.
I disagree with this person on this one particular point.
Exactly.
She's being so cat.
But the fact that we've agreed on that means that we're also in an echo chamber. So we're cannibalizing one another in an echo chamber.
And yeah.
Genius. Anyway, but on a sort of related note, which is an in-joke that people won't get that are listening to this, but fuck it, when have I ever cared about my subscribers? Whatever. I was going to talk briefly about the Dave Rubin situation. Are you aware of what's going on there?
Because of Twitter, yes, I am. Mostly because of Tom Bloke and Vadim, and I think a few other people who are tweeting. Anti-social media also had a few good tweets. So, but for those who aren't in the know or who have lives outside of Twitter, could you get everybody caught up?
Yes, Mother Jones, which I believe is a purely online publication, unless I'm very much mistaken there.
Back in the day, I think you can get a physical subscription, but they've put a lot of emphasis on their online publication. Yeah.
I've only ever known it as an online thing, and certainly in this instance, they published an article on a friend of the channel, very much one of my muses, Dave Rubin, who is. Well, I'm going to assume you know. I'm not going to patronise you. You either know who he is or you fucking don't. I presume if you're subscribed to me, you sort of know who he is. Anyway, used to work for the Young Turks. Now he's a right-wing piece of shit. And anyway, in the article, he was described as far right. Heaven forfend. But he took that so poorly, even though he's a free speech warrior, that he threatened to sue Mother Jones over what is essentially an opinion piece. I mean, it's so ludicrous as to be untrue. Shows up his nonsense about free speech. And also, Dave, just on a quick personal area, if you don't want to be seen as far right, then don't have people like Stefan Molyneux, Mike Cernovich, Paul Joseph Watson, Alex Jones, all these people on your show, and describe them as the new centre, which is his little phrase he's come up with for these people, and include yourself in that new centre, when these people are very, very obviously far right. If you then describe yourself as the same thing as them, you're saying, I am far right. Is that a crazy analysis?
You know, I just say Dave Rubin, it kind of has lifted my spirits since Kraut went offline, got banned from Twitter again within like 10 days of getting a new account. Because I never really understood lolcow, as in the schadenfreude of watching someone just completely melt down on social media.
Well, Dave Rubin is...
Yeah, and he's doing that. He's having a bit of a meltdown over this, people describing him as far right. And the idea that you're going to sue, I mean, for defamation, it has to be false. And there's a good case content that it would be an accurate description.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
That's the thing.
And
when he has these far right people onto his show and just sits there nodding in agreement with what they're saying when they're spouting their far right shit, it's a pretty open and shut case. And he's talking shit. And, of course, what about censorship, Dave? What about if someone had done that to you?
I get called things all the time, There's only one person that I've talked about defamation because I understand the difference between, what people say in opinion and actually publishing false accusations that damage someone's reputation. This isn't going to damage his reputation. If anything, he's getting mileage out of it.
He's getting publicity and also affirmation from the very people he's but affirmation from the very people who he's trying to appeal to, who are far right, by the way. So it's ridiculous.
I really don't get that at all.
But basically, so this stream isn't really about anything. I just thought I'd sort of bring that up. So is there anyone in the chat? I haven't even been checking.
It might just be a solo.
Oh no, there are 26 people watching. Good lord.
What are you people doing on what is it tonight? Saturday? I lose track of the days now. It's just like focus group. Time to do a focus group. I could tell you a little bit about the findings if you wanted.
Yes, please do.
By the way, get some questions.
Whilst the cat's mother is getting the that's a British phrase, but I'm sure that's probably sounds sexist.
What?
The cat's mother, basically, when you refer to someone without using their name in a kind of derisive way, it's the cat's mother. It's a fucking weird British thing. Anyway, yes.
That's why we took the language away from you guys.
Well, you destroyed it. I'm sorry, Yaldov, as a triple fucking shortening of you would have.
Oh, yeah.
You would have done, whatever. I'm sorry, that's not acceptable, America. That's just not acceptable. Anyway, and aluminum, get out of it. Anyway.
What do you?
Yeah. Use guys. Stop it.
Y'all.
Y'all. Yes. Whilst Christy, the country bumpkin American, explains the incredibly brilliant piece of psephology she's got for us, questions in the chat, and after that I'll answer some questions, I suppose. Anyway, you've got the floor.
Well, it's not so much psephology because that would be surveys and the prediction of election outcomes. What we've been doing since the 18th of May is going around the country doing focus groups and talking to voters both pre and post election. And I'm going to be doing a more extensive show with hopefully both of the members of my team, or team members, I guess. There's sort of 3 investigators, and we all divvy up the work. But it is my study. And I'm going to be looking to retire from the study soon, so I'm going to be leaving it in good hands. But anyway, yeah, the pre-election stuff was really interesting in a lot of different ways. One, so I'm going to go with the politics, and then I'm going to go with the terrorist attacks. First of all, because in the end, there was nothing in our data collection that showed the attacks had any impact on the election really whatsoever. I think one person who was a conservative talked about security issues, but he was speaking about them sort of digitally as well as national security. So it was more of a principle thing than a reaction to the attacks. But on the politics, what was interesting pre-election was that Theresa May, as you know from the polling, and Jeremy Corbyn were having different trajectories. So May started off high and ended up low. Corbyn started out low and ended up a bit higher. And early on in the focus groups, people were talking about the fact that, you know, for some of us, especially our conservative voters, having enough of a majority for a strong Brexit. People also talked about really understanding tactically why May would have called the election when she did, and the benefits of having a stronger majority, so she would have more negotiating power when she came back with something to be voted through Parliament. And I guess I was sort of surprised at the extent to which people were not that disappointed by how cynical a move it was. It was, I guess that's maybe the difference between, you know, being an American where we have fixed elections, and then in the UK where calling an election when it's advantageous is just kind of what you do. But it just, again, as an outsider, it just, people were like, yeah, you know, she was in a, you know, there was a good bump in the polls, and she was going to go into negotiation. So that was interesting because, you know, her rationale for the election was Brexit, but the problem was that for the rest of the country, they weren't voting on Brexit again. This was a general election, and it was about all kinds of issues. And some people...
I was just going to say, it was really surprising how little that topic actually came up during the whole election, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, people in our focus groups talked about hard Brexit and soft Brexit, but then they would even say, I don't really know what those terms really mean, and nobody's saying what would be the difference between a hard and a soft Brexit in terms of, say, the movement of people. So they heard the media echoes about these things, but there was a lot of admissions of just a lack of clarity as to how those would be meaningfully different. But getting back to the election itself, generally, over the course of it, when the dementia tax especially started to hit, we were seeing, basically, Theresa May was getting rated in our leadership evaluations as being a strong leader, but not being very personable. And increasingly, that weakened to, you know, being weak and wobbly as opposed to strong and stable, closer to the actual election day. And Corbyn started off with people basically saying things like, oh, he seems like the kind of guy who'd wander up to you at a church fair with some organic honey that he'd cultivated from the bees in his backyard.
He does actually make his own jam. That actually is true.
And also, we saw a real generational difference with the attacks. People over the age of, say, 45 and 50 would directly mention his connections to the IRA, whereas younger voters, people younger than that, even though those media narratives were out there, they weren't repeating them in our focus groups. So we did see some generational effects in terms of discrediting Corbyn as, you know, being arm in arm with terrorists. But as it went on, and this was where I think a tactical error was made by Corbyn, as people saw him speaking and saw him in the news, and also he started to do more appearances, you know, he showed up even though Theresa May didn't show up to one of the debates by the end. People said the more they saw him, the more they realized he wasn't the radical that the media was painting him out to be, and they started to quite like what he had to say. And I think Corbyn really should have taken more advantage of this. And instead of saying, well, if Theresa May's not going to turn up to a debate, he should have been at every single one of those. And he should have been speaking, because what we found was the more people saw him, the more they liked him. And therefore, he really disadvantaged himself, in my opinion, at least, by not engaging with the media content as opposed to the sort of stomping and doing the campaign stuff. Can I
just interject slightly there, just to play devil's avocado? it's possible that had he turned up to those earlier debates, Theresa May would have seen that bounce in the polls and responded accordingly. And she can be, I mean, she's, especially at Prime Minister's question, she can be quite good at dealing with Corbyn in a way that Corbyn doesn't seem massively able to handle. So if she turned up to one of the last sort of 2 debates, it's possible there might have been a counter reaction to that based on the strong and stable bullshit. And she'd have brought up IRA and all of that, so who knows. But I'm just as devil's advocate.
If you haven't yet, there's an excellent piece in Politico.eu, Why May Lost. And they do a really good time sort of calendared analysis of how the election was called in a very surprising way, how the manifesto was crafted in the sort of, back corners and smoke-filled rooms, and then also their strategy. So they were so confident Corbyn was not going to be a threat. By sort of the second or third week of the campaign, they had decided to attack Europe instead. And there was this whole thing in media about some leaked tapes, and they were trying to make the European negotiating team, because they wanted, again, to make the election about Brexit. So had Corbyn been going on TV, they'd already discounted him at that point. And they didn't really start to see the impact of, this is it. That's like the collective thing of calling the election when she said she wasn't going to call the election, then doing the U-turn on the dementia tax. And she started to be seen as not being strong and stable. That was the thing that she was running on. And also her distance and not really talking and engaging with people, avoiding the debates, all of this stuff. Basically, people didn't really have confidence that she was going to be able to lead a government. Especially with her older voters, we found a lot of concern about even the idea that they would just take your home. And that was a terrible policy, and it got sort of distilled down in the media to the concept of the dementia tax. But it was a great enough soundbite to really undercut her with her core support. And we saw conservative voters still planning on voting conservative because they didn't see Labour as a potential option, but just being so disappointed with how she conducted her campaign. Now, on that, I should say that there were, at least from what the evidence that I saw, a lot of people wanted Labour to do well. But quite a lot of the movement, I think, is less in sort of a whole bunch of people discovering they're actually social democrats and more to do with people really losing confidence with May and voting in a tactical way. I mean, come on, Kensington? It's not like there's not going to be free markets, set up where people can just pick things up that have been donated, man. So I think Corbyn actually could have done more to get to marginal seats where people were doing tactical voting and take more of an advantage of it. I think he actually could have done better than being 60 seats short, which is where he ended up.
Well, I was just going to say also Canterbury, which had been Tory since 1918. But, yeah.
Right. But on the other side of the coin, you've got the Scottish Conservatives running a really great campaign on the threat of indie ref up in Scotland. So they managed to actually, put up a campaign there where Labour didn't, and ended up picking up seats that might have actually shifted over to a possible coalition on the left. So again, I think that was another tactical error of not really paying attention to Scotland and how the Conservative Party was becoming the alternative for people who didn't want a second referendum. And that was really the kind of campaign that was going on up there, which Labour didn't counter.
But it certainly, it seems that the campaigning they've done focusing on England worked brilliantly well.
Well, yeah, but you can't win with just England. That's kind of the whole problem.
Well, you can't, but if Scotland does eventually go independent, that groundwork might be very, very important going forward.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's the reason why the SNP saw such a surge in 2015 was because people who had voted Labour all their lives and their families had voted Labour going back, to their grandparents, was they felt like they were just red Tories. They'd been so consumed with finding the centre in England that they'd abandoned all the principles that really made them Labour. And in Scotland, they could get the SNP for basically the same policies that they used to support the Labour Party for. So yeah, I think the Scottish Labour have their own issues as well. But just a little bit about post-election, I guess. What we're seeing is some pretty uniform assessments of where the parties are. most people consider the Conservative Party as is really weakened and especially embarrassed going into the EU negotiations. They're concerned about the impact that that's going to have on Britain's ability to negotiate. And some people more than others. Obviously, people who want a hard Brexit are more concerned than people who really would like to throw away the whole referendum on exiting anyway. So we've got a range of opinions there. Most people perceive Labour as being stronger. And what was interesting was when we asked people, how would you feel if there was an election called in the next 12 to 18 months? The most enthusiastic pro, yeah, let's go again, voters were all Labour voters. Because
well, that's not surprising.
They taste blood in the water.
Yeah, the most recent poll suggested Labour would have if it was run, on the day that the poll was taken, Labour would gain a 12-seat majority, which isn't a huge majority, but considering they were looking at being wiped out a month ago, it's pretty incredible.
Right. But the one thing that I would caution people who are a little bit maybe over exuberant in their Labour happiness is one notice I picked up this time when people were discussing the future. There's a real difference in people who say the country's broke, we can't afford it, we don't have any money left. And that ties on very much to concerns about immigration and concerns about like providing public services and other things that are very expensive, like healthcare. And people who frame Britain as a wealthy nation that has a lot of resources and has a history of compassion, at least, for the poor and that kind of thing. Those are the people who are obviously very much more on the left. And so I think in part, if Labour wants to learn how to be successful going forward, they have to learn to talk to people who are convinced that there's no money left in the coffers and that Britain is up to its eyeballs in debt and things can't be, you can't afford all these nice things. And have them understand how the numbers add up, feel like they're spending money we don't have. That would be my big conclusion for them.
Yeah, I think that's wise on the national, well, even on the local level. But I mean, one thing I would say to them, and this is one of the reasons I'm not running for office, is what the fuck are you talking about, you mad bastards? We're about to spend 100 billion on nuclear weapons. If we're that poor, how can we afford that?
Well, yeah, and you always get people who are saying we need to do more about immigration and make the system better, but then also complain about how somebody who is trying to immigrate from a Commonwealth country because they married a British citizen, how much money it costs and how long it takes. And but that was the Conservatives who made it complicated and expensive, and you're voting for them because of their immigration policies, but you don't like their immigration policies. I don't understand. But yeah, that's how people kind of bifurcate things in their mind, where they're not up on that all of the policy ins and outs. So
right, we didn't get many questions, and the ones we did get are mostly silly, but I'm going to go through them anyway. Question. Right. Why does Paddington have a lampshade on his head? He doesn't. It's a fez.
It's a fez. Come on, people.
It's a separate hat. That's why they call him Paddy Two Hats, because he's got two fucking hats. Anyway, so that's that one taken care of. Yes, I still have a strike on my channel, which is why I'm doing the live stream on my second channel.
Me too.
You're starting to look more and more like Rory Cats. Did Rory consent to this? I think you'll find I was here first, so he has to consent to my thing. And there was one serious question. Any thoughts regarding Prime Minister May getting bundled away by security from angry residents of the Tower and nearby estates? Yeah, I don't know if people saw this. If you want to know a little bit more about the actual story itself, there's a thing on my main channel, a video about this, the Grenfell Tower fire and all that. And Theresa May reacted really poorly to it by basically not giving a shit, which is what we were talking about earlier. And then she, a couple of days later, having been shamed by even the right-wing press, said, "What the fuck are you doing?" So she went down there and went to a local church, and the residents turned up, and the security had to whisk her away as if she was in some sort of war zone. It was ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, if you're prime minister and you're not even safe to walk the streets of your own capital, I'd suggest maybe quit. Just a thought.
If I were her PR people, I would have had her meet with small groups of the families at a time and just have her sit there and listen and shake her head and have her staff take notes and talk about how the local services are going to help them, and she's going to stay personally involved, and then bring in the next group and do the same thing again, because even if people have an outburst, it would be easier to handle, and she'd just sit there and accept it because she was there to represent the failures of the government.
Yeah, and not just that, but it's ridiculous to use the excuse of security reasons on the very same day that the Queen went there, Prince William went there, and Jeremy Corbyn went there. So clearly it wasn't, the security problem wasn't for them, was it? So
and also,
I mean, the common denominator is you don't turn up. That's on you.
And also, this is, these are local ordinances. I know there was a bill that went through Parliament and stuff too that could be, it sounded like a lot of failed, and she's not responsible for what happened on the local level. And I think she really overblew her security issue, and then she made it a security issue. Yeah. By not handling it correctly.
Yeah, had she turned up on the day after, the morning after, met with people, I think she'd have probably been all right. But the fact that she didn't and has now been shamed into doing so means that she can't. She couldn't just turn up there now. There'd be a fucking riot. And there nearly was. Like I said, they had to whisk her away in a bomb-proof car. Well, technically she always travels in a bomb-proof car. But, she had to be whisked away behind a police cordon in the streets of the capital of the country. I mean, that's really bad. I mean, for the woman that was running on Strong and Stable only a fortnight ago, this is very, very iffy.
Yes, I think, the Conservatives, one of the things that people mention, the focus groups, is that they don't expect her to last very long, because once things have sort of been stabilized in terms of how the supply and confidence arrangement is going to work, the long knives are going to come out. They all expect her, a lot of people anyway, expect her to not be leader another year because she's just done such a bad job. But they can't kind of take her out now because of the Brexit negotiations and everything else. But yeah, so we'll see.
Okay, serious question, which you might be able to give a bit more insight into. Do you believe Jeremy Corbyn will win a majority in the next election in the next 6 months? So there's sort of two questions in that, really, isn't there?
I don't see that. I think at this point, what it would take for there to be another election would be that the government would have to try to pass a bill and not have enough votes, and then lose confidence, and there would be a vote of no confidence. Again, 60 seats is a lot to make up, and Labour could have done more tactical work in potentially marginal seats. He stuck a lot to places that were strong Labour, that were Labour strongholds. So he went to places where he could draw big crowds, Bernie-sized crowds, and that looked really great. But he didn't spend enough time in places that he could flip. So that would be a question if Labour could do that. And the other thing too is there enough people to make up a 60-seat deficit in 6 months, or would you basically just have a very similar result by running the election again so soon? Would anybody have really moved? Especially if they got rid of Theresa May. Because once you remove Theresa May and her advisors and that manifesto and the dementia tax, a lot of the seniors will come back.
Possibly. But maybe some of the seniors will be dead. So, No
That's
offense.
A rather morbid political strategy. We'll just wait for the fuckers to die.
True, but the baby boomers really do need to fuck the fuck off right now, frankly.
Or you can find policies to win them over. You have to compete with them.
No. They just need to die. They just need to fucking die already. They've elected Trump. They've done Brexit. They put fucking Marine Le Pen. Well, actually, no, to be fair, the majority of the older people voted against Le Pen in France. So maybe the French old folk can stick around for a bit, but the rest of them can fuck off. Anyway.
And this is all humor, people.
Exactly. This is, there's no way this video is going to get
cut off and distorted.
I don't know if Corbyn's necessarily going to fire me as one of his strategists, which might be for the best, I suppose, but there you go. What was some of the questions? What did you think of Lord Buckethead? The Monster Raven Looney Party.
No, he's
the Monster Raven Looney Party are quite tiresome for the most part, but he seems like a decent enough chap. But whatever.
Yeah, he's not a Monster Raving Looney. That guy was also on stage along with Elmo. if you remember.
Okay. I thought he was. I just assumed a idiot dressed like a twat called Lord Buckethead. He would be Monster Road and Luna, because that's what they generally do.
He's got his own party, and he wants to
get rid of.
He wants to get rid of all the lords except for him. Little House of Lords.
I can get behind. I can get behind that.
See, there you go.
Yeah.
One vote for Lord Buckethead.
Yeah. Well, I don't live in the constituency, unfortunately, but there you go. Where are we? Don't you think the Democrats should focus more on fighting racist Jim Crow voting laws? I suppose.
Yes. But I mean, the problem is that Democrats don't have majorities, in part because of those racist Jim Crow voting laws, because of gerrymandering in either the House, the Senate. Well, the Senate, that's not a fair assessment because it's 2 per state. So in the House and also in local elections. So that's why we really need a change election, like a wave election in 2018, because the census will be taken in 2020. And it's always easier for an incumbent to hold on to a seat than it is for a challenger to overcome an incumbent. Even open seats are easier to be won than taking something away from somebody who's had that seat forever. So with Trump's approval ratings down in sort of like the 37 to 32 watermark, we're going to be looking at the Georgia 6th congressional race as a really good watershed to see whether or not they can flip a district that really should have easily been won by the Republicans. So, but yes, we should be, once we get power, then definitely I think that, I personally think that there should be federal voter civil rights acts where for federal elections, Congress has, it's in the Constitution when the election is set. So I think there's a reason there to say that it's within the constitutional right of Congress to set elections. And then also the conditions of those elections. So I think there should be 6 weeks of early voting. I think it should be, if you do have a valid ID that's listed, you should be able to do same-day registration. I think you should be able to prove your ID with, things like bills and a checking account, not necessarily a photo ID for people who don't have that documentation. And I think that should be how federal elections are won. And then if the states also want to time their elections to those general elections and their primaries accordingly, well, those then they can. But hopefully they would, eventually have to do the same balloting process and accept the same ID because they're going to be running 2 elections simultaneously. That would be my strategy.
Yes. What about all these Fox Hunter voters? You've got to get them. They're a key demographic. Yeah, actually, to bring it back to the British election, the fox hunting thing was such a bizarre thing to do because the numbers. I saw one poll that suggested that 90% of the country was against it, and yet that was one of the first things they announced, the Tories, when they were running for. I
actually talked to someone who was pro fox hunting, and you
found one of them.
Yeah. Oh. It was like, and then.
But that's the thing. There's very little you can get any British people to agree on, and one of them is, let's not do the fox hunting thing anymore. And yet that was one of the first things they went with, and that was really a bad omen for them. That was the sort of the point at which you look back and you think it all went downhill from that point, really. But anyway, is it okay for me to go out of my way to punch Richard Spencer's punchable Nazi face at every opportunity? I personally would say yes. How say you, Krista?
So I've done a lot of thinking about this issue because it keeps getting thrown back in my face. And when I was talking to Woolly Bumblebee and her significant other, there was a point that we kind of came to that I think is my new position, which is if you wouldn't want to live under a fascist system, at some point, it's Nazi. And the question is, what line has to be crossed for you to punch a Nazi? Is it when they're marching in the streets? Is it when they take over a significant portion of a political party? Is it when they take over a political party? Is it when they start getting elected to government? Is it when they start running government? What point are you willing to defend democracy with? And that's the question I think everybody has to answer themselves. I'm not to the point where I'm ready to punch a Nazi. But then given that gradient, there are people who would be willing earlier than me to violently protect democracy in order to, it's kind of a paradox that within democracy, you might not be able to allow every kind of speech. You might not be able to allow the speech that would actually overthrow the democracy you're trying to protect.
Yeah, well, I the old saying about freedom not being free, and that's true. It isn't free.
Mhm.
Sometimes that means physical resistance against those that would seek to destroy A, the system itself, and B, destroy human life.
Now, the other part of
So, I
that
mean, for
is,
me, you go on.
yeah, if you think it's morally justified, it's still criminal. So, just
Oh, yeah.
because you feel morally justified in punching a Nazi, you should fully expect to be arrested and to be taken to court, and you can plead guilty because you would be, and then do community service or go to jail for a period of time. Those are the other
Yeah.
side. That's the other side of it too. Is you have to
Yeah,
bear the consequences of your actions.
exactly. Well, and not just that, but obviously the informal consequences of Nazis. They are still humans and are going to fight back. So there are costs to pay. But for me, and this might sound a bit grandiose, possibly for what is essentially an act of, but I see it as my solemn duty to protect just human life, human decency. Um, Possibly take that on myself, if that makes sense. Like that seems like a sacrifice worth making.
And as I said,
And I don't have a criminal record, so first offence, I'll be all right. Be fine.
and being in Europe, and as I said, a lot of people who take this more extreme, like, no, we should allow all kinds of speech views, tend to be Americans, sometimes Canadians, who've never lived under a fascist regime or had one bombing their country. Now, of course, there was Pearl Harbor, but it was a military installation, and it was not on the mainland. We've had terrorist attacks, but we've not had a sustained attack or threat of attack or bombings from a fascist government that sought to destroy our democracy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, American democracy really threatened. Even the American Civil War was essentially a battle between two democracies, albeit that the slavery thing means that millions of Americans were not living in that democracy, if that makes sense. But in essence, there was two democracies battling away. It wasn't really the same sort of thing. Even so, most threats to America have been from essentially America.
Yeah, the greatest crisis, our greatest national crisis in terms of a war was the Civil War.
Yeah,
but it was an existential threat.
Exactly. Yeah. It was two ideas of what democracy should be, rather than one trying to destroy the other. If that makes sense.
Yep, exactly. Well, no, it's like how the Canadians, people copy your form of government. People have a parliamentary system of government with prime ministers, and that's basically, even though they broke away from Britain, they basically became another version of it in terms of its government.
Well, they haven't really broken away from Britain, because in order to call an election in Canada or America or New Zealand, and various other places, they have to go to London to ask the Queen to dissolve the Parliament in Ottawa or Canberra or fucking is it Christchurch or Wellington, wherever in New Zealand? Yeah, which is just bizarre.
I just want to see the Queen go on strike.
In Australia, presumably, the Prime Minister has to ring up presumably in the middle of the night in order to make sure that there's daytime in London to get through. Otherwise, you just go, well, can we have an election? Well, she's in bed. Fuck off. Ring back in 12 hours, you prick. So that's
ring up right before you go to bed.
Exactly, yeah. Just before you go to bed, ring up. And, in theory, she could say no. She won't. That's, to be fair, the Queen, I mean, I'm against the concept of monarchy in general, but in terms of being a constitutional monarch, she's played it to a T, really.
No, I think that would be great if she just went on strike and refused to do that. Just like, see what you guys are going to do now, huh?
Yeah. Well, technically in Britain, we've already got the law in place, which would allow, if I think it's called something like monarchical frustration of Parliament or something, whereby Parliament could bypass the Queen and, in theory, dissolve the monarchy completely. Actually, but
then
so
who would dissolve Parliament?
No, that's the thing. The Queen would be removed from that process, so it would be down to the cabinet. Although, well, technically, the Prime Minister would make the decision, but the cabinet would have to approve it, I think. But anyway, yeah. So if the Queen in a bill or something, they could enact that law. Well, the law is enacted. The provision within the law could be enacted by cabinet vote, or I think parliamentary vote, one of them, and they could bypass the Queen, which is fair enough. I think that's perfectly fine. But you just think, well, actually, the bizarre thing of if you remember, and I don't know if you do necessarily, because you obviously, I don't know if you were living here at the time, but when the royal baby, the female royal baby was being born, and they've subsequently changed the rules of succession to it now being the oldest heir rather than it being the oldest male heir and then the next male heir, and then eventually it gets to the women. And you think, well, okay, well, that's sort of a step forward or whatever. But the reason it was given for that was, oh, we need to get rid of this medieval concept, blah, blah, blah. And you think, they're talking about that within the framework of them coming out of the right set of testicles and ovaries. They're God ordained. Yeah. Like, it's all medieval bullshit. Why get rid of this specific tiny bit of medieval bullshit and keeping the rest of it? It's like trying to sweep up a fucking earthquake with a dustpan and brush. It's ridiculous. What are you doing?
Yeah, you guys have a lot of, if it was evolutionary biology as a comparison, like the queen is like the wisdom teeth, of your democratic development, and that
you're gonna have to explain that because that makes no sense at all.
All right, so you have a more less developed form of democracy, right? But then you have these incidents that happen like Magna Carta, and then you have Cromwell's revolution, you have the Restoration. And so you have this, whereas in France, the government was controlled almost entirely by the aristocracy and the monarch was, absolute ruler. Because in Britain, you have this weird vestige of a royal role for legitimacy, and also because of the role of being the head of the church, you can't just abolish it. The French who were Catholics and the Spanish, whatever, they didn't claim to be the head of their churches. So there was a unique union. And you also had the Commons, which had a pretty, an increasing role in the government. And so that was what got exported. And so even though it's a representative democracy, it's got the House of Lords, which is left over, and people have tried to modernize the second house, and it's just a disaster because it's unelected. And so they try to get experts in there, but it's always partisan, and it's just a freaking mess. But you can't just destroy it because you need an upper house. So you're stuck with this crappy version. It just kind of keeps limping along. And this is what I mean about how it's evolved over time, and it has these sort of weird vestiges that just, like, it doesn't kill it off, but it doesn't make sense to have it, like wisdom teeth.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm with you. Right. Yeah, but I mean, I don't know how you would feel about this, but my solution to the House of Lords and its legitimacy would be to have
Your sound totally cut out, so I actually have not heard a thing you've said. It started with your explanation. I don't know if you've muted yourself or whatever, but I can't hear a thing. I don't know if people in the chat can hear you, but I certainly can't. I don't know if your lead got disconnected. I was really disappointed because I was so looking forward to your answer. No. I can't see the sound coming up when you talk, if that makes...
Hello.
Oh, now I can hear you. Hey,
hello.
You're
right,
back.
Okay. So my fancy microphone is now off, so you're going to have to put it with my shitty microphone. Anyway, my solution to the House of Lords. You'd keep some of the good old bits that will actually do work and are quite good, and you'd modernise it by having a genuine legitimacy based on popular public vote. You'd have it directly elected, but on proportional representation grounds. And before the election, each party would come up with their long list. So you'd have like their number one lord, the lord that would basically remain. If they got like one vote, they'd have one lord of them. And then all the way down based on order. And so if they got enough votes in the popular vote, the overall popular vote in the whole country, they'd for 20 lords out of, say, let's say they had 800 lords or something, then you'd have the top 20 on that long list would be elected to the House of Lords for that party, and they'd have to produce that before the election, if that makes sense. So you know who you're electing potentially and the quality of those people, and those people can be directly scrutinised by the voters before the election, and you'd have it on a genuinely proportional basis, and that would therefore mean that you'd have elements of proportional representation so that the vote didn't count at all, because even if their Commons representative wasn't the person they voted for, their vote would still count towards that party in the Lords, if that makes sense.
That could be a possibility if Lords no longer meant like the Lord title. right? Because they'd be elected and then they'd be booted out. So it might be some people were there on a consulting basis, maybe like a non-voting basis.
This is the thing. That actually one element I didn't bring up, the Lord's title, and I think that's wise and modern and all the rest of it. Because actually, one of the annoying things is the Queen's speech, right? One of the excuses given for it being delayed till it was supposed to be on Monday, it's not going to be on Wednesday, was that this, by law, it has to be, the Queen's speech has to be written on goat skin parchment, and apparently that takes several days to dry, from the right. And you think, Parliament has been telling the British people for the last 50 years it needs to modernise. All the time, you need to modernise this, modernise that. And yet you're going to have a guy called Black Rod bang on a door, a fucking 90-year-old who came out the right set of bollocks and vagina fucking 100 years ago, or 90 years ago, whatever, right? Who's then going to read a load of old shit on goat skin parchment while sitting on a fucking throne in one of her million palaces, telling the country that they need to modernise. Fuck off. Like, how hypocritical can you possibly get?
Yeah, anyway. You guys do democracy weird. Not that we're much better.
I was about to say, considering who your head of state is right now, I'm not sure America's really
rub it in. That's hurt. That hurts.
Especially because at least our prime minister is the person who got the most votes. That is literally true. So.
Yeah, I was kind of comparing, like, if Bernie, sort of, if Corbyn, I guess so much of his victory was expectations. And I did see him with Andrew Marr, and Andrew Marr said, so you lost the election. And Corbyn says, well, we didn't win the election. And I just thought, that's a tautology, mate. It doesn't sound any better. Like, I know you did better than expected, but if you want to actually make the changes, you have to win. You have to win all of the seats you need to have a majority, or at least go into coalition, which is, I think, another tactical error, that if they wouldn't have, people might have voted differently in Scotland if there had been an actual opportunity to unite against the Tories, against austerity.
True, but one of the problems the Tories are going to have, which might bring down the government, is that even with the DUP, they would still lose their majority on matters that are devolved.
Yes.
In the House of Commons, there are some bills that affect everyone, and so all of the MPs get to vote on that. But for things that are devolved to the Scottish administration, and indeed when the Northern Ireland administration is sitting, which it isn't, because Northern Ireland's a fucking mess anyway. It's been worse in the past, but it's a mess. But anyway, for things that are dealt with directly by the Scottish Parliament, and that being MPs who are elected in Scotland rather than Scottish MPs in English seats, don't get to vote. And because the Tories do quite well in Scotland, they lose I think it's their 19 seats or whatever in Scotland. And so they then lose their overall majority, which means potentially for things that affect England and Wales, like, they could still, even though they have in theory a majority, they could still very much lose, even if all of their MPs vote for it. So that might bring down the government, possibly, but we'll see.
What a mess! What a mess she's made.
Yeah, what a mess! What a mess she's made, and brilliantly. But all of the shit bits from the manifestos they've had to drop now.
Oh,
because it wouldn't have gotten through, even with the DUP. Fox Hunting had no chance. She needed a 70, 80, 90, 100 majority to get that through, because loads of Tories would have voted against it, because, like I said, 90% of the country are against it. And Tory MPs, I hate them, but they're not fucking stupid people. They're not going to go with something that's so incredibly unpopular. It's certainly enough of them weren't. So that's not getting through. Grammar schools, like I say, education's devolved, so they don't have a majority. So that's going to have to go, because there's no way the SNP or Labour or the Dems are going to vote for that. So that's out the window. The dementia tax was already sort of dropped even before the election. That's gone. They're going to have to keep the triple lock on pensions. Basically, nothing they plan to do, they're going to be able to do. This Queen's speech is going to be so pointless. It's a waste of goat skin parchment, frankly. They might as well write on the back of an envelope. It would mean just as much.
Get out the 2015 manifesto, because that's about the only thing that they can cite.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's ridiculous, but it's going to be fun times if nothing else.
Well,
you might be back in the country before the end of the year, before the end of 2017. Oh, well, you don't like it here? Well, fuck off then. No one invited you. So these foreigners coming over here,
studying our politics. helping us understand things better.
Exactly.
Damn them all to hell.
Helping us understand our politics, propping up the entirety of our healthcare system. It's disgrace.
Yeah, spending my tax money there, definitely adding to the British economy when I come in and stay.
Exactly. I'm gonna have, if you do come back, we're gonna have to meet up because we sort of were planning on one, but I was busy and had some private shit, so we're gonna have to meet up.
Yeah, and I was like a flyby.
Make a
Yeah,
a silly little video. It's been quite nice.
Yeah.
Roland's, for those who don't know, Roland's is in New York. I met up with Foxy Jezebel and one or two other people, and photobombed Trevor Noah, which is quite cool.
He's definitely getting ahead in like actually meeting people from the YouTube community in real life race really fast, bastard.
Yeah, because he's met everyone, hasn't he? Now, basically.
Yeah. So yes, I'll have to come.
He hasn't met me.
Well, I'm thinking about coming up for the Fringe.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, I'll have to make sure I never meet Roland's just to give you a chance at the race.
Yeah, do that.
Look, he'll turn up at my door and I'll just not answer. Fuck him. He's from the wrong way. He's an upside down person. I don't want these people around me.
Well, actually, we are concerned about the fact that the government's not going to be very stable, and we could very well be back in the field before the end of the year. And so one of the things we're planning on doing is turning around the recordings from the transcripts as soon as possible and doing an ebook on basically what people thought and were saying during the run-up to the election and afterwards. And it's going to be kind of a mix of, there's a book out called Sex, Lies, in the Ballot Box, which is 50 chapters, but every entry is only like 1,500 words long. And so we're going to kind of do it thematically, like perceptions of May, perceptions of Corbyn, perceptions of Tim Farron, UKIP, SNP, Plaid Cymru, and then also go deeper and to take particular people, like one of our participants who voted UKIP last time, and she's very opinionated and real strong personality. And we were really fascinated to see, because when we got in contact with her for this study, she wouldn't identify with any political party. Right. And what she ended up doing was spoiling her ballot, because she wanted to express something, but she didn't have the option, none of the above. Really frustrated with where the government's going, and she just couldn't support any of the parties. And she's like, to me, a really fascinating kind of angry voter that maybe we don't hear a lot from in the surveys. And so, kind of looking in on her perspective and what she had to say would be also, maybe one of the people featured in the book. So we'll write it on spec and then put it out as an ebook and then shop it around to publishers.
Yeah, well, as you say, you're going to have a quick turnaround because potentially it could be all over soon. One of the best jokes, because they had the bit where all the people who were re-elected and the new MPs and all that, they had to go there and swear an oath of allegiance, and they had to look at the formal kind of signing to become MPs thing. The parties has like a speech in Parliament, and it was all a bit of fun. And actually, fair play to Theresa May, because they re-elected Bercow as the Speaker of the Parliament, right. And she actually made quite a good joke. She said, and he was elected unopposed, and no one voted against him. So she said at least someone got a landslide, which is quite a risque joke, because there's a lot of Tory MPs behind her thinking, "You nearly cost me my fucking job, you bitch." What the fuck are you doing? So there's that, and that's that. But a lot of them thinking, "Well, you cost my friends their seats, and all this." But anyway. So that all happened, and Tim Farron, who's now stood down as the Lib Dem leader, but anyway,
right.
Thankfully, the homophobic prick. But anyway, he stood up and gave his speech, and one of the things was he told us a crap joke about the Whigs or something, and he said, and people groaned, and he went, "Oh, don't worry, I'm here all week." And one of the responses from one of his own MPs was, "If the Parliament lasts a week," which is quite nice. Yeah, which is, I mean, I think that gives you a fair idea of most of the people in part, and obviously they laughed, and you think, well, I think people know this is not really even a serious Parliament, is it? No one thinks this is going to last.
No.
And that's understandable, because it's built on the shakiest ground. I mean, it really is the biggest political irony that could have happened out of this election, that they run on strong and stable and end up strong and stable government, fucking coalition government, which was only in power, 2 years, well, just over 2 years ago. And that was actually relative. That was incredibly stable, considering it was a coalition, whereas this thing just looks like a train wreck from the very start,
There's also the whole issue of whether or not they can really even go into coalition with the DUP, given the Good Friday Agreement and the fact that the DUP is one of the people negotiating, and trying to form a government in Belfast. And the Great Britain is meant to be a neutral partner. And you can't be a neutral partner when you're depending on one of the people negotiating, who has a vested interest in the outcome in Northern Ireland. You're depending on them for votes.
Yes, well, there's a couple of things to mention on that. Firstly, it's just for clarity, it's not actually an official coalition. It's called confidence and supply vote.
Yes,
which basically means per vote in Parliament, they go to the DUP, negotiate what the law is going to be, and the DUP say yeah, and then they basically give them those 10 votes. They go through the lobbies with the Tories. But that's on a per vote basis. They're not actually in coalition, so the DUP won't be in government as such, just to clarify. But yeah, I mean, even so, to have an informal coalition, as it were, with the DUP potentially actually breaks the law. Well, breaks the Good Friday Agreement, because like you said, they're supposed to be an impartial partner in Northern Ireland. Although technically they can't ever really be an impartial advisor, because they are still technically the power there. Like in theory, the British government could just send troops there, and the troubles start all off again, and that might actually end up partially being a potential problem, because Sinn Féin, who are essentially the yin to the DUP's yang in Northern Ireland, Gerry Adams, the president of that party, went to Downing Street for talks. That's sort of typical. That will happen.
That's a unionist side.
The Republican side.
Sorry, go to the Republic of Ireland. Sorry, not union with Ireland, but to join the Republic. Sorry, I got my terms.
The DUP want Northern Ireland to remain part of the UK, and technically it's the UK rather than Great Britain.
Right.
Great Britain is just the main body of England, Wales, and Scotland, and the United Kingdom includes Northern Ireland. And Sinn Féin want Northern Ireland to go back to being a part of the Republic of, well, technically it's never part of the Republic of Ireland. Basically, they want one united island of Ireland. Community as well, who want essentially a sort of independent, anyway, it's weird. Anyway, Sinn Féin went to Downing Street and came out and said that basically the British government have broken the Good Friday Agreement. Falls, which there's genuinely, but there's potential there, and that was really the only thing that's been holding back within the Republican community. And when I say Republican, please, Americans, don't mistake that for what you think a Republican is. That they couldn't be further apart on the political spectrum, really. But anyway, it means something different. If the Good Friday Agreement falls, Sinn Féin, the political wing of the Republican movement, basically, have no way of going to their young people and saying, stick with the process, stick with peace, because they tried that. They signed the Good Friday Agreement. They had power sharing in Northern Ireland. Things seemed to be going really well. That stumbled. There's no power sharing agreement in the Stormont Parliament anymore. If the Good Friday Agreement then falls, there's no way they can hold back that tide of young, disaffected Republicans, and you could see a return to violence. Now, do I think it's going to go as bad as the Troubles? It doesn't look that way. I think there's been enough economic investment in Northern Ireland where a lot of the social elements of that underpinned the Troubles aren't there, and the legal impingements upon Catholics isn't in place anymore. There's been equality legislation and so on and so forth. So that frustration isn't there. But could you see a return to genuine violence on the streets in Northern Ireland? Absolutely, you could. So fundamentally selfish about what Theresa May is doing, because she's not even doing this. She's not doing this for the good of the country. She's not even doing it for the good of the Tory party. She's doing it for the good of Theresa May, just to prop up her government, rather than accepting she's been embarrassed and resigning as she should, because she's gone to the country looking for a massive mandate and has been given essentially a slap in the face with a wet fish. She got more votes, she got more seats, she's got the right to form a government. But this government is shaky as fuck and is threatening to potentially bring terrorism back to the streets of Britain from non-Muslims. I mean, I know we had obviously Muslim attacks and all the rest of it, but the Catholic and Protestant terrorists could very well kick off again because of this nonsense. And it's not. This isn't just pie in the sky, because one of the demands of the Orange Order, who are essentially a sort of a fucking borderline terrorist group in Northern Ireland, who are unionist, allied to the DUP. One of the things they tried to get the DUP to get in this negotiation, and it's impossible to know whether they have, I certainly hope they haven't gotten this, is that they want the Drumcree March or whatever it's called. The series of very, very controversial marches through Republican areas by unionists, and they want the British government to guarantee that that march will go ahead. And it hasn't for about 10 years now, but they want it to go ahead.
Can you explain the meaning of that parade?
Right, yes. Yeah. It's marching through what was a loyalist area a long time ago. And it's essentially a celebration of when I think William of Orange, the Dutch leader, who became, I think, King of England a long time ago, slaughtered lots of Irish people, and actually slaughtered what were Tories. They were actually conservatives in Ireland, but Catholic conservatives, hundreds of years ago. And this is a celebration of, or one of the celebrations of that. And many of the marches still take place that go through unionist areas, but various of them, the Falls Road and so on and so forth, go through Republican areas. And when they used to, like I remember as a child, it was always on the news every summer. These fucking marches would go on, and it would spark terrorist outrages, bombings, kneecappings, murders, left, right, and centre, because it's a direct provocation. Basically, the continuance of these marches is a direct provocation in Northern Ireland, because you're basically celebrating the murder of their ancestors. For fuck's sake. And so, thankfully, under the power sharing and all the rest, a lot of those most controversial marches have now been stopped. And they want the most controversial one reinstated. And if that happens, Northern Ireland's going to go up in flames. That's not me. That's not conjecture on my part. That is a fact. Indeed, fact. So I do hope that the British government went, no, we can give you certain. I hope in place of that, austerity or not, I don't mind them giving them money so much, because at least that's going to, you know, British citizens or whatever. But if they give them that, yeah, you're going to see a return to IRA terrorism, because the only thing holding back young Republicans from getting involved in terrorism has been, look, the political process is working. There's progress being made. We can do things peacefully. Change can happen peacefully. But once that stops, you've got no argument to go back to your people with. And if you don't, the old John Kennedy line, I think, is appropriate, that those that make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable.
Mm.
True. And that's what's being risked here, all for the sake of propping up Theresa May.
Well, I think that's analysis of the situation, Kevin. Thanks, and all over a pint as well.
Yes, yeah. I apologies for it being a bit downbeat, but given the political situation and the social situation in Britain right now, it just feels rather like a tinderbox waiting to go up in flames, and that's not nice. Because even when Theresa May was Prime Minister before the election, you kind of felt there was a stability there, and now that's totally obliterated. And that's not nice. I mean, I obviously don't want her to be Prime Minister, but if she's going to be Prime Minister, I prefer things to be calm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, look at who we have in the White House. So, yeah, but
yes, America's a very strange place, because it seems so obvious as an outsider that some really fucked up collusion with foreign powers has gone on here.
Yeah, and it just keeps going.
Yeah. And not just that, but the Philando Castile thing, that's ridiculous. I don't know if you've been following
I saw the result
of the guy killed.
Yeah.
You think, how many people are the police just allowed to kill with impunity?
I don't understand this.
That's the thing. In Britain, I'm so glad the police don't have guns, because A, fewer people get shot, and B, the police and civilian relationship is so much better because it's calmer. because you don't, you know, when you interact with a police officer, that it doesn't matter how hairy it gets, the best he can do is beat you up. And the thing is, you can't get away with beating someone up because there's no excuse. There's no, oh, I just pulled the trigger. It's pretty obvious that you've gone out of your way to beat someone up. You can't do that. You were kind of, oh, I got itchy trigger finger. I was scared. He looked menacing. And they use all the same excuses, and they always get away with it. And it's so obvious there's a racial element to it. Sorry. Yeah, go on. Sorry, go on.
No, I honestly don't know what it takes to get an officer convicted of murder when it's so obvious. I think the one guy who, when the black man was running away from him and he shot him in the back, but honestly, I can't think of any other officers that have actually been held to account when they've killed a civilian. And if you've killed a civilian, especially while arresting them, it seems to me you failed at your job, because their job is to protect and serve. And if that means protecting us from you, then that's part of your job. You know, there are ways to de-escalate situations. And American police could learn a lot from British police and other European forces that engage in de-escalation. And they're confronting somebody, and the situation starts, as you said, you know, to get a bit leery.
Exactly. And it's, I mean, I understand it in America because the civilians have guns, the police have guns. But, I mean, firstly, pass some reasonable anti-gun, or not even anti-gun, just reasonable legislation. Like, difficult to feel sorry for Scalise, the guy who got shot, the GOP lawmaker, because you think you voted for the law that allowed mentally ill people to have guns, and then you get shot by a mentally ill guy. I mean, you literally were asking for that. You literally voted for that.
Well, I don't think I would quibble with the wording. I don't think he was asking for it, but what he was doing was allowing it to happen. He was allowing for more people, and those people included himself. But I don't think asking
exactly,
for
that's the thing. He voted. He voted for it, knowing that it's going to happen to Americans, and as an American, it happened to him.
Yes.
I'm sorry, that's on you. At that point, I find it very difficult to feel any sympathy for the guy. Now, I don't want anyone being fucking shot, which is partly why I support very strong gun legislation. I realise that that's not really possible in America. But surely not allowing people who are very, very obviously unstable to have guns, doing like background checks, just really simple shit, could save lives. And they're in the pocket of the NRA. It's really... Right. Man.
And part of the reason why the laws don't work is because Congress underfunds the agencies and the programs that are meant to do background check registration, where you link up state, local, and federal information on a single person. I mean, that takes a lot of coordination of information to make sure you got the person's name right. And so they defund those things so they don't work, so people can get guns because they can't get the information right. The other thing too, if you know, there's a common thread that's a news article pointed out about people who engage in these mass shootings, these sort of middle-aged white guys who end up going on killing sprees. And one of the patterns is domestic violence. And if people, men or women, were not allowed to have a gun if they were charged found guilty of domestic abuse or violence or hitting their kids or anything else, then that's another way of legally getting the hands out of people who are too violent to be trusted with a weapon.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Convicted of a violent crime.
Oh, but the thing too I wanted to say was what really annoyed me was Congress's reply to this incident seemed to be to say, oh, we need to get more security around the Capitol and maybe not gather in groups so much, as opposed to taking guns off the street. They're like, we're going to turn ourselves into a gated community.
Yeah.
And we're going to protect ourselves.
I especially loved...
We're not going to fix the problem.
I loved Ted Nugent coming out saying we need to de-escalate the violent rhetoric toward politicians. And you spent the years under Obama basically hoping you would get killed. Yeah. Fuck you.
And now he wants to de-escalate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Fuck you, people, man.
Well, I mean, it's a step in the right direction, but the timing is suspicious.
Well, exactly, because imagine, okay, in a couple of years' time, 3 years' time, whatever, whoever Democrat gets in, correct? Do you think he might return to his towards politicians? Because I imagine he probably will.
Well, if he keeps his pledge and he keeps his mouth shut, at least he won't be the focus for celebrations of comments by people on the internet. He'll deny them the content for the memes that they're looking for.
Yeah, but we'll wait and see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we've expended as much light as we go into. So I think unless you've got anything further to say on any of the issues we've discussed, this might be a
No,
good
unless you
point to
wanted
break.
unless you wanted to gossip about Kraut, but we can do that off air too. Just the flame out of him on Twitter.
Okay, well, yeah, if you've got some Kraut stuff you want to reveal in public, by all means.
Well, it's not really revealing anything so much as that, he got kicked off of Twitter because a lot of things, but one of them included making fake tweets and attributing them to Chrisiosity, of all people. Having her, depicting her saying terrible things. That and a few other things might have got him kicked off of Twitter. And so he reappeared about 2 weeks ago. And he was such a lol cow.
He's gone already.
And he's already gone within 10 days. He's already gotten booted off, not just suspended, but like kicked off.
Yeah. I gave him a month. I said a month and he'll be gone, and he didn't even last 2 fucking weeks. Ridiculous. Yeah.
And if you want to see why, I did capture some of his more bizarre things because I just started a little hashtag Kraut tweet regrets. So if you want to see some of the things that got him kicked off within 10 days, check out hashtag Kraut tweet regrets.
Yeah, he's so bizarre. You know he's gone over the edge because the other day, right? I was on Twitter. I think it was like 2 days before he got rebanned for the millionth fucking time, and I got up dead early in the morning. And like, obviously, he lives in Austria, you live in Germany, so it's basically he's an hour behind me. And so I got up dead early in the morning, and Kraut had messaged me. No, sorry, I messaged him in the morning about the death of Bob Whitaker, who's the guy who came up with the white genocide mantra. You might have heard of the mantra, and this is the thing: the Africa for the Africans, Asia for the Asians, white countries for everyone, white genocide thing. He was the start of that.
Okay, all right. Oh, he had a heart attack, didn't he?
Yeah, and he died. Yeah, a couple of days ago. And so I tweeted to Kraut just to poke him gently. I'm sorry that your Lord and Savior died, with a link to the story saying, Bob Whitaker had died. Because Kraut is essentially a fucking Nazi at this point. I think there's again, I'm happy to say that, and if he wants to try and sue me, I could just bring up the tweets of him saying he hopes as many Muslims as possible get killed. Like, it's pretty fucking cut and dried. He's a right-wing, ultra fucking far-right piece of shit. I don't give a fuck what you think about tax codes, you prick. You're far right, okay? Down dead early in the morning. And he then spent the next 20 fucking hours, literally the next 20 hours, messaging me, Tom Bloke, Sean and Jen, a number of other people, for 20 fucking hours, almost unbroken. I went through all of his tweets, and it was every 10 minutes or 15 minutes he was tweeting this person, that person, trying to get me to admit that I'd been involved in a doxing thing that I wasn't involved in, that happened 2 years ago, and that the guy he accused me of doxing and trying to extort money from or something had thanked me for my actions in the original event underneath that 1 hour live stream, the 1 hour video that Kraut did, the conspiracy theory shit about how the SJWs are all evil. The guy that Kraut was trying to say I doxed and tried to extort money from thanked me in a comment, in reply to my comment under that video, thanked me for my involvement in that thing. And then 2 weeks later, Kraut, in this 20-hour long binge of madness, was still trying to get me to admit that I doxed this guy, even though the guy had thanked me for my role in the thing. And I don't even remember any of this because it happened 2 fucking years ago. But the guy himself clearly didn't think I doxed him and wasn't. But anyway, and so for 20 hours he was on this fucking rant because I jokingly said that Bob Whitaker was his Lord and Savior. And you think you've gone at that point, you've moved even beyond lolcow to jumping the whale on a lolcow. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Well, I didn't provoke him.
Amazing.
I didn't provoke him with a sort of a smarty, you know, tweet. I was just being reasonable back to him, and it just seemed to infuriate him. That's enough to set him off. But one of the things that did come out of the conversation, which I'm going to be doing a video on in the next couple of days, is he's going around saying that he apologized for his participation in the Google stream about Russian Deadpool shooting Heather.
Okay,
and
well, you can apologise all you like, but you still did it. Like, it's,
well,
I mean,
when I asked him for evidence of it, when I asked him for evidence of it, he gave me 2 links. One to a hangout where he shows up about 50 minutes in, and they talk about it, and people in the hangout try to convince him it wasn't morally wrong, in which he never says, "I'm sorry." And then to a second segment of his hangout with somebody else where it's called I admit to a mistake, or I made a mistake, where he talks about how bad it makes him look to have said those things after he said that cited Thunderfoot's dad thing. And he goes along and he never actually says the words "I'm sorry." He doesn't acknowledge, well, that's not true. He doesn't acknowledge "I'm sorry" for his participation in the chat to anybody, let's say, who heard in the audience, or friends of Heather's who found that disturbing and hurtful. He doesn't say that. What he does do is apologize for yelling at Bering for putting up the Russian Deadpool video, because Bering, yes, because Bering told him that that was the only and significant interaction he had with Deadpool. And that's why he put up in his channel. And so Kraut apologized to Bering for yelling at him for trying to exploit the situation. But the thing is...
So the only apology he made... Go on, sorry,
yeah. No, you go ahead. Yes, let's take that part first. Because Bering lied. We'll come to that next.
Yeah, okay. I was just going to say, the only apology he made was to someone who also exploited the death. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yes.
I mean, the thing is, I would sometimes I give people for whom English isn't necessarily their first language the benefit of the doubt. But Kraut speaks very good English. He clearly can't misunderstand what you meant by "have you apologized for your role in this thing?" Surely.
No. Yeah. But he thinks it's saying that he was wrong is an apology. But if I say 2 + 2 = 5 and I admit I'm wrong, that's not an apology. And the reasons he gave for it, I'm going to, anyway, because I asked him for his apology video, and he said, I'm not doing one on my main channel. I'm like, well, why not? If you're sorry, why wouldn't you put it on your main channel? And then I offered to say, well, show me where they are, and I'll put it together in a video, and you can circulate it. So he gave me the links. But yeah, the thing is that Bering made this claim that his interaction with Russian Deadpool was the video that he showed after the murder took place. But the fact is, he had hung out with Harley in Russian Deadpool for like an hour, and then he and Russian Deadpool had a hangout after that confrontational video that he made, where they sorted it all out.
Yeah.
And Bering left all of that out.
Apologized for having, made that confrontational video. The confrontational video that Bering then used as excuse for saying, oh, he's a violent maniac. Clearly he's guilty, before anyone knew anything.
Yeah. And then put his Patreon and PayPal stuff at the end of the video.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty.
But yeah, so the person that Kraut apologized to lied to him. And I've actually got, someone sent me both copies of both Hangouts, so I'm going to include that in the video too, because it's not the only person. Someone else that was upset with Bering for putting that video up, he said that was my last and only significant interaction with him. True. So anyway, yeah, Kraut's community doesn't lie. Our community lies. Except when Bering lies to him. So anyway, I wanted to just say that was going to come out as a video on my channel in a few days.
Yeah. Not just that, we don't just lie, we're criminals. That was his big thing, we're criminals, somehow. Even though, as it was pointed out to him, hate speech is illegal. And he's done plenty of that. He's the criminal, technically. Not that I would necessarily want him charged for it, because actually hate speech is sort of a weird and controversial law and all the rest of it. But if we're going to go with who has actually committed crimes here, it's you, Kraut. You literally called for Muslim genocide. So, fuck you. But anyway, on that Muslim genocide note, which would have been an interesting way of ending an Alan Partridge episode. Yeah, on that bombshell, I think we probably leave it there. Thank you, Christy, for a very short notice hanging out with me.
Yeah, it was a lot more chill than Blaire.
It must seem a little bit strange. Exactly, yeah. It must seem a little bit strange, but I feel slightly annoyed that some of our other friends haven't joined us. I have to say.
Well, probably they're just out having more fun on a Saturday night than either of us two old people.
I don't fucking care. I don't. Excuses. I want attendance at my behest. Anyway, I'm talking shit now. Anyway, yeah. Thank you to everyone for watching and listening. Thank you for Christy. If we survive the coming apocalypse, I shall see you at some point in the future. Pip pip.